Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku fused with Cyborg's tech and became a living weapon. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The wind over Musudiful was a lonely sound. It whipped around the corners of the skyscraper, a mournful sigh that seemed to echo the cavernous emptiness that had just been carved into Izuku Midoriya's chest. He stood on the rooftop, hands gripping the safety railing so tightly his knuckles were white mountains on a pale landscape of skin. The metal was cold, a stark, unfeeling reality against his trembling fingers. Below, the city was a sprawling circuit board of life, cars like electrons flowing through concrete pathways, their headlights beginning to blink on as dusk painted the sky in bruised shades of purple and orange. It was beautiful. It was a world he desperately wanted to be a part of, to protect. A world that had just been locked away from him forever. It's not wrong to dream. However, you need to be realistic, kid. All Might's voice, the voice that had been his guiding star, the sun in his personal sky, replayed in his mind. It wasn't cruel. It was kind, even gentle, and that somehow made it so much worse. It wasn't the voice of a bully telling him he was worthless. It was the voice of a god telling him a fundamental, unchangeable truth of the universe. Quirkless. Zero. A car without an engine. A hero without a power. He'd asked the question he'd been rehearsing in his head for 10 years. Can I be a hero, even without a quirk? The answer was no. A sob caught in his throat, a jagged thing that felt like swallowing glass. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the tears leaked out anyway, hot trails of failure on his freckled cheeks. His bright yellow backpack felt impossibly heavy, sagging with the weight of his one remaining possession that held any meaning, his notebook. Hero Analysis for the Future, number 13. The cover was singed, the pages waterlogged and smelling of sludge. Damaged, but salvaged. He'd clutched it to his chest like a holy text when All Might had handed it back, signed. A consolation prize. A signature on a death certificate for a dream. He slowly let go of the railing, his body slumping. The hero, his hero, was gone, having leapt away in a single, mighty bound, leaving behind nothing but a gust of wind and a shattered 14-year-old boy. Izuku looked at his own hands. They were just hands. No fire, no ice, no explosions. They couldn't stretch or harden or create. They could write notes, grip a railing, and wipe away useless tears. They were the hands of a civilian. The word felt like a prison sentence. He finally turned, his feet shuffling across the gravel of the rooftop. The journey down the building's stairwell was a blur. Each clank of his red sneakers on the metal steps was a drumbeat in a funeral dirge. He emerged onto the street, the ambient noise of the city rushing in to fill the silence All Might had left behind. People bustled past, chattering on their phones, laughing with friends. Each one was a potential life he could never save, a story he could never be a part of in the way he yearned to be. He walked without direction, his internal compass shattered. His path home was an ingrained instinct, but his mind was adrift in a gray sea of despair. A billboard overhead showed the fiery hero Endeavor, his face a grim mask of determination. "Ignite your inner fire!" the caption read. Izuku's inner fire had been extinguished. A gust of wind blew a discarded newspaper against his leg. The headline was about a new hero agency opening up downtown. The world kept spinning, heroes kept debuting, and Izuku Midoriya was being left behind. He passed a park where children were playing. One boy had small, feathered wings, and he fluttered a few feet off the ground to catch a ball, his friends cheering. Another girl touched a dead flower, and it bloomed back to life in her hand. Quirks. They were everywhere. They were the very fabric of society, the language everyone spoke. And he was mute. His feet, seemingly with a mind of their own, had carried him away from his usual route. He found himself in a district he rarely visited, a sleek, modern neighborhood of glass and steel that hummed with quiet, powerful technology. This was the mainland annex of Island, a hub of support item innovation and advanced scientific research. It felt alien, a place of polished chrome and silent efficiency. Then, the world shattered. Boom. The sound was a physical blow, a concussive wave of pressure that slammed into Izuku, throwing him off his feet. He hit the pavement hard, his ears ringing with a deafening tone. Car alarms shrieked to life. The pristine glass facade of the building across the street, the Takami Research Center, exploded outwards in a glittering shower of deadly rain. Screams replaced the ambient hum of the district. People ran, a panicked herd stampeding away from the source of the blast. Izuku pushed himself up, his head swimming. His hero instincts, battered and broken as they were, flickered to life. His eyes, wide with shock, scanned the scene. From the gaping maw in the research center, something was emerging. It wasn't a man. It was a chaotic, shifting mass of metal, a cyclone of rusted rebar, twisted car parts, sheared street signs, and gleaming, high-tech components, all swirling around a vaguely humanoid core. Wires snaked through the metallic maelstrom like veins, sparking with stolen electricity. At its center, two malevolent red lights glowed like a predator's eyes. More! I need more! A voice rasped from the metallic monstrosity, a sound like grinding gears and scraping steel. Flesh is weak. Machines are pure. I will liberate you all! The thing, this villain, extended a limb of jagged metal and slammed it into a nearby hybrid car. The vehicle was torn apart, its components flying through the air and assimilating into the villain's body, which grew larger, more monstrous. A technopath. A powerful one. Pro-heroes would be here soon. They had to be. Izuku knew he should run. Every rational part of his brain, every echo of All Might's realistic advice screamed at him to flee. He was a liability, a quirkless, heartbroken kid. A zero. But then he saw them. Huddled behind a crumpled server rack that had been blown onto the street was a family. A mother, a father, and a little girl no older than 6, clutching a stuffed rabbit. They were pinned down, a tangle of live power cables sparking and hissing between them and the only clear path to safety. The father had a gash on his forehead, his face a mask of terror, as he tried to shield his daughter. The mother was trying to pull them back, away from the crackling wires, but they were trapped. The villain, whom the news would later dub Scrap Heap, was turning its attention, its glowing red eyes sweeping the area for more metal to absorb. It hadn't seen the family yet. But it would. Izuku's breath hitched. His heart, which had felt like a dead stone in his chest just moments before, began to hammer against his ribs. It wasn't a hero's heart, not anymore. But it was a human one, and it was screaming, saving people is the coolest thing you can do. A memory from his childhood, watching that old video of All Might's debut. His body moved before his brain could protest. It was the same blind, idiotic impulse that had sent him running toward the sludge villain to save Kaken, an act of utter foolishness born from the deepest, most ingrained part of his soul. He scrambled to his feet, unslung his heavy yellow backpack, and with a desperate, choked cry, he hurled it with all his might. It wasn't a weapon. It was a distraction. The bag, filled with books and his precious notebook, spun through the air and struck the metal behemoth with a pathetic thud. Scrap Heap paused its rampage. Its head, a horrifying amalgamation of security cameras and license plates, swiveled to face the source of the impact. The red optic sensors focused on Izuku. Insolent flesh. The villain ground out. The distraction was all Izuku needed. Run! He shrieked at the family, waving his arm frantically. Now! Get away from the wires! The father, startled into action, scooped up his daughter and scrambled away, his wife close behind. They made it. They were running, disappearing into the panicked crowds. A wave of dizzying relief washed over Izuku, so potent it almost buckled his knees. He did it. He saved someone. Maybe All Might was wrong. The thought was instantly obliterated by a tidal wave of metal. Scrap Heap, enraged by the defiance, had lashed out. A limb of twisted girders and sharpened steel shot forward with impossible speed. Izuku had no time to dodge, no quirk to counter. He saw it coming, a wall of rusted death, and threw his arms up in a useless gesture of self-preservation. The impact was absolute. It wasn't a clean hit. It was a shredding, tearing force that lifted him off his feet and threw him backward like a ragdoll. A searing, white-hot pain erupted in his side and chest. He felt a sickening crunch as he flew through the air, his trajectory sending him careening back through the hole in the research center. He smashed through the remnants of a display case, a shower of safety glass exploding around him. His momentum carried him across the lab floor until he slammed into a thick, reinforced pedestal at the room's center. His head connected with the metal base with a horrifying crack, and the world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of blinding light and agonizing pain. He lay in a heap, broken. A quick, desperate glance down revealed the source of the searing pain. Several long, thick shards of metal, remnants of the server rack his own foolish act had put in the villain's path, were protruding from his torso and left arm. Blood, shockingly dark, was already pooling beneath him, staining the polished white floor a deep crimson. His breath came in wet, ragged gasps. The edges of his vision were tunneling, turning gray. So this is it, he thought, a strange, detached calm settling over him. I saved them, but... His fading gaze drifted upward. On top of the pedestal he'd hit was a strange object, its containment field now flickering and dying from the collateral damage. It was a cube, about the size of a shoebox, but its appearance defied logic. Its surface was a perfect, non-reflective black, like a hole in space, and its corners and edges seemed to shift and rearrange themselves in impossible geometric patterns. It had no seams, no buttons, no indication of its purpose. It was utterly alien. This was the Genesis box. A relic of unknown, otherworldly origin, the prized possession of Island's research division, personally overseen by David and Melissa Shield. They had been in a shielded observation room when the attack began. Dad, the containment field is failing. Melissa's voice cried out from a nearby doorway, her blonde hair dusted with debris. She and her father had emerged to assess the damage to their life's work. The feedback loop from the villain's technopathy must have overloaded it. David Shield yelled, his eyes wide with horror not at the villain, but at the unstable artifact. If it goes critical, they saw Izuku then, a bleeding, broken boy lying at the foot of their greatest discovery and greatest terror. The Genesis box, its internal systems disrupted by the villain's EM fields and the physical shock, began to glow. Thin lines of brilliant cyan light traced across its obsidian surface, forming complex, shifting circuitry. A low hum vibrated through the floor, a sound that felt older than the world. Izuku's life was fading. The pain was dissolving into a spreading, unnatural cold. His heart fluttered, a dying bird in his chest. I'm sorry, Mom, was his last coherent thought, and then, the box acted, sensing catastrophic biological failure in proximity, sensing hostile technorganic entity, sensing high-level volitional impulse. Core directive, preservation, protocol, Genesis. Activated. The hum intensified into a resonant chord. The black surface of the cube rippled, not like a solid, but like liquid mercury. A single droplet of shimmering, silver-blue material seeped from its seamless form, then another, and another, until a stream of it poured down the side of the pedestal. It was not a liquid, not a metal, but something in between, a river of liquid starlight that flowed with intelligent purpose. It reached the pool of Izuku's blood. It did not mix. It touched the edge of the crimson stain, and the blood itself seemed to unspill, retracting back towards his wounds as if time were reversing. The silver-blue substance followed, flowing over his ruined clothes and skin. It felt cool. The fire in his chest was being quenched by a soothing, impossible cold. He felt a tingling sensation as the nanite stream reached the largest piece of shrapnel embedded in his side. There was no sound, but he could feel a vibration as the microscopic machines began their work. They didn't push the metal out. They consumed it. The jagged edge of the rebar that protruded from his ribs seemed to dissolve, breaking down atom by atom, its raw materials absorbed into the flowing river of nanites. The stream thickened, splitting into 1,000 different tributaries that swarmed over and into his body. They poured into his open wounds, not just sealing them, but actively rebuilding them from the inside out. Torn muscle fibers were knitted back together, shattered ribs were fused, reinforced with an atom-thin metallic lattice. Punctured organs were meticulously repaired by a legion of microscopic surgeons. From the observation doorway, David and Melissa Shield watched, paralyzed by a mixture of terror and awe. It's healing him, Melissa whispered, her hand covering her mouth. It's not healing, David corrected, his voice trembling with a scientist's horrified fascination. It's assimilating. It's rewriting him. The largest concentration of nanites flowed over Izuku's left side, where the damage was most severe. His torn shirt and the flesh beneath dissolved away, replaced by the gleaming, shifting silver blue of the nanites as they constructed a new, better form. Smooth plates of an unknown metal formed over his ribs and shoulder. His left arm, mangled and broken, was completely encased. The metal flowed and shaped itself, forming a new appendage that was both organic and artificial, with defined musculature that pulsed with an internal blue light. The nanites swarmed his head, repairing the fracture in his skull. They flowed over his face, and the skin on the left side, from his cheekbone to his temple, was replaced by a smooth, seamless metallic plate. His left eyelid dissolved, and the iris of his eye flickered, the familiar forest green bleeding out, replaced by a deep, steady, electronic red. Lines of cyan light, like the ones on the box, began to trace paths under his remaining skin, mapping out a new circulatory system, a new nervous system, intertwined with the old. The Genesis box on the pedestal grew dimmer, its mass visibly shrinking as it poured its very essence into the boy. It was a transfusion of cosmic proportions. Izuku was no longer dying. The pain was gone, replaced by a thrumming, constant stream of information. He was aware of everything. He could feel the nanites in his own blood, patrolling his veins. He could feel the subtle shift in the building's structural integrity from the explosion. He could feel the electromagnetic field of the sparking power lines outside. He could feel the last vestiges of the Genesis box being absorbed, its core programming, its memories of distant stars and ancient wars, downloading into his very cells. His consciousness, which had been a flickering candle flame, was now a roaring furnace of data. It was too much. The universe was screaming at him, and his new mind was screaming back. With a final, silent surge of energy, the last of the box vanished. The boy on the floor shuddered, and then lay still. The process was complete. The roar of a different, more familiar voice cut through the chaos. Texas Smash! All Might, in his magnificent, muscular form, had arrived. He moved like a blur, appearing beside Scrap Heap. The villain, distracted by the strange energy flux from the lab, had no time to react. A single, piston-like punch, radiating shockwaves, connected with the villain's core. The swirling vortex of metal was blasted apart, its components raining down onto the street with a deafening cacophony. The central humanoid form, now just a man in a strange exosuit, was unconscious before he hit the ground. The immediate threat was over. All Might's signature smile was absent, replaced by a grim line. His blue eyes scanned the wreckage, his super senses searching. He'd heard the report: a villain, an explosion, and a description of a green-haired boy running toward the danger. A cold dread, heavier than any weight he'd ever lifted, settled in his gut. "Young man!" he called out, his voice booming. "Are you here? Are you all right?" He saw the shields and rushed toward the lab. "Are you harmed? What happened?" David Shield could only point a trembling finger into the lab. "The boy. All Might, the boy." All Might stepped inside, his massive frame filling the doorway. And then he saw him. Lying on the floor, in a halo of shattered glass and dried blood, was the same boy from the rooftop. The same earnest, tear-streaked face he had left behind. But he was terrifyingly different. One half of him was Izuku Midoriya, with his wild green-black hair and freckled skin. The other half was something else entirely. Something alien. A seamless plate of unearthly, silver-blue metal covered the left side of his face, from which a single, crimson eye glowed with a soft, pulsing light. His left arm was a marvel of biomechanical engineering, its surface smooth and powerful. More metal plates were visible on his chest and torso where his shirt had been destroyed, glowing with the same cyan circuitry that was faintly visible under the skin of his human half. The bloody wounds were gone, sealed by perfect, metallic flesh. The Genesis box was nowhere to be seen, seemingly absorbed into him. All Might felt his breath catch, his muscular form threatening to deflate into his skeletal one from sheer shock and guilt. "Be realistic." His own words echoed in his ears, a cruel mockery. He had snuffed out this boy's dream, and in his despair, the boy had run headfirst into a nightmare. This was his fault. He knelt down, his huge hand hesitating before it gently brushed the boy's dark hair away from his forehead. He was so still. Too still. Is he? Melissa asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ignoring the bizarre transformation for a moment, All Might pressed 2 fingers against the human side of Izuku's neck, searching for a pulse. For a terrifying second, there was nothing. Then, he felt it. Thump thump. A heartbeat. Strong, steady. Alive. Relief and a profound, soul-crushing dread washed over the number 1 hero in equal measure. He looked at the boy, this fusion of flesh and impossible technology, a living monument to a hero's failure and a machine's strange salvation. Izuku Midoriya was alive, but he was no longer just a boy. He was something new. Something other. A hero of 0, now remade into 1. Awareness returned not as a gentle dawn, but as a hard reboot. There was no soft fade from black, no groggy consciousness slowly assembling itself. One moment, there was nothing, a silent, timeless void. The next, there was light, sound, and data. So much data. BIOS checks complete. Neural interface, 99.8% synchronization. Biological systems, stable. Heart rate, 62 BPM. Respiration, 14 per minute. Core temperature, 37.0 degrees Celsius. Nanite colony, active. Energy reserves, 78.4%. System online. Biological host stable. Query? The voice was not a sound in the traditional sense. It didn't vibrate through the air to be caught by his eardrums. It bloomed directly in the center of his mind, a calm, impossibly clear alto, devoid of inflection or emotion. It was as serene as it was terrifying. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He wasn't in the ruined lab. He was in a room of purest white. The ceiling, the walls, the floor, all were a seamless, sterile alabaster. The only color came from the thin, gray blanket covering him and the rhythmic, emerald-green line of a heart monitor beside his bed. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. A hospital, then, a very advanced one. He tried to sit up, and the world tilted on its axis. A flood of information cascaded through his vision, overlaying the white room with a filigree of cyan text and glowing wireframes. Vector, Z-axis shift. Host musculature engaged. Stress on spinal column, 0.02%. Atmospheric analysis. Oxygen, 20.9%. Nitrogen, 78.1%. Argon, 0.9%. CO2, 0.04%. Trace particulates, antiseptic polymers, ozone. Structural analysis. Walls composed of reinforced titanium ceramic composite. Tensile strength, 950 MPa. It was everywhere. Numbers, readings, analyses. His brain, his poor, overloaded human brain, scrambled to make sense of the sensory assault. He squeezed his eyes shut, but the data remained, projected onto the backs of his eyelids. It was part of his sight now. It was part of him. The voice spoke again, its placid tone a chilling contrast to his rising panic. Sensory input overload detected. Applying filtering subroutine. Query? A mental menu, crisp and clear as day, appeared in his mind's eye. It had options: visual, auditory, tactile, data stream. Under data stream, a toggle was set to maximum. With a surge of desperate thought, Izuku willed it to change. He didn't know how he knew how to do it, he just did. He mentally pushed the setting down to minimal. The flood of text receded, collapsing into a small, unobtrusive line at the bottom of his vision displaying only his own vitals. The roaring waterfall of data had become a gentle stream. He could breathe again. He opened his eyes, the white room now looking blessedly normal, save for the faint, cyan line at the periphery of his sight. He pushed himself up, his right arm pressing into the firm mattress. He felt solid. Alive. The phantom pains of his memory, the shredding metal, the crushing impact, were gone. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, his bare feet touching the cool floor. He felt okay. A little disoriented, but okay. He must have been healed. Maybe some advanced healing quirk. Then he looked down at his left arm, the breath hitched in his throat. It wasn't his arm. It was a construct of gleaming, silver-blue metal that shimmered with an inner light. It wasn't a crude prosthetic, bolted on and clumsy. It was a masterpiece of biomechanical engineering, perfectly sculpted, its metallic plates shifting over one another like the muscles of a panther. The lines were sleek, powerful, ending in fingers that were elegant and unnervingly sharp. A network of cyan light pulsed rhythmically beneath its surface, in perfect sync with the heartbeat displayed on the monitor beside him. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through him. He lifted the arm, and it responded instantly, flawlessly. It felt like his own. But it wasn't. He flexed his fingers, and the metallic digits curled into a fist. It felt impossibly strong, the subtle hum of its internal mechanisms vibrating up to his shoulder. His right hand, his familiar, freckled human hand, came up to touch the alien limb. The sensation was a dizzying paradox. He felt the touch on both sides, the cold, smooth, unyielding surface of the machine against the warm, soft skin of his human fingers. His gaze traveled further up. The metal didn't stop at his shoulder. It integrated seamlessly with his body, a smooth plate covering his left pectoral and wrapping around his ribs. He tugged at the collar of the medical gown. More metal. It wasn't a cast. It wasn't armor. It was him. A wave of nausea churned in his stomach. He needed a mirror. He needed to see. His eyes darted around the room, landing on the polished, reflective chrome of a medical supply unit against the far wall. He stood on shaky legs, the heart monitor beside him beginning to beat faster, its green line jumping in frantic peaks and valleys. One step. Then another. He felt a strange imbalance, his left side heavier, more solid. He reached the unit, and braced his right hand against it, forcing himself to look at his reflection. A stranger stared back. No, that wasn't right. It was worse than a stranger. It was a distorted, monstrous version of himself. One half of the face in the reflection was his. The wild green-black hair, the wide, terrified green eye, the familiar spray of freckles across his nose and right cheek. The other half was a nightmare. A perfectly smooth, seamless plate of the same silver-blue metal covered the left side of his face, tracing a sharp, geometric line from his hairline, down past his temple, and curving under his cheekbone. There was no seam, no scar, no sign of transition. The metal simply began where his skin ended. And his eye, his left eye was gone. In its place was a glowing, crimson-red optic, a single, baleful light set in a black socket. It stared back at him, unblinking, analytical. It wasn't an eye. It was a sensor. A camera. A choked, strangled sound escaped his lips. This couldn't be real. It was a dream. A horrible, waking nightmare brought on by the trauma of the attack. He raised his trembling right hand and touched his face. His fingers brushed against his warm, human cheek, then traced the line of his nose to the bridge. He moved them to the left, and they met the cold, unfeeling surface of the metal. There was no sensation on the metal side of his face, yet he could feel the pressure of his own fingertips through his right hand. A complete sensory disconnect. He was a thing of two halves. 0 and 1. Flesh and machine. He was a monster. The strangled sound in his throat became a raw, guttural scream of pure terror. He recoiled from his own reflection, stumbling backward and crashing into a tray of medical instruments, sending them scattering across the floor with a metallic clatter. He fell, landing hard, and scrambled away from the reflection, crab-walking until his back hit the far wall. He curled into himself, wrapping his human arm around his head, trying to block out the sight of his own monstrous form. Sobs tore through him, violent and ragged. The carefully constructed world of Izuku Midoriya, already cracked by All Might's rejection, had just been atomized. This wasn't just a lost dream anymore. This was a lost self, host emotional state, critical. Heart rate, 158 BPM. Adrenaline levels, 450% above baseline. Recommending stress reduction protocols. Get out of my head! Izuku shrieked at the calm, internal voice, his own voice hoarse with panic. The door to the room hissed open. Izuku flinched, looking up with his one green, tear-filled eye. 3 figures stood in the doorway, their faces a mixture of pity, awe, and profound guilt. It was the Shields, David and Melissa, the brilliant father-daughter scientists from Ireland. And with them, looking gaunt and skeletal, his oversized clothes hanging off his frame, was Toshinori Yagi. All Might. Young man. All Might started, taking a hesitant step into the room. Stay back! Izuku cried, pressing himself harder against the wall. He held up his left arm, the metallic one, as if to ward them off. It felt alien, a weapon he was pointing at them against his will. Melissa took a half step forward, her hands raised in a placating gesture. It's okay, Midoriya. We're not going to hurt you. Her voice was soft, but Izuku's new senses were telling him more. Subject: Melissa's shield. Heart rate: 98 BPM. Analysis: elevated, indicative of anxiety and sympathy. Subject: David's shield. Heart rate: 85 BPM. Analysis: focused, indicative of scientific curiosity mingled with apprehension. Subject: Toshinori Yagi. Heart rate: 112 BPM. Analysis: severe tachycardia. Respiration irregular. Stress levels critical. Primary emotion: guilt. He was analyzing them. Without trying, without wanting to, his machine half was dissecting their very biology, reducing their complex emotions to simple data points. The realization sent another wave of sickness through him. David Shield stepped forward, his expression grave. He was a scientist looking at the result of an impossible experiment. Izuku Midoriya, he began, his voice steady. My name is David Shield. I know this is a shock. Please let us explain what happened. Izuku didn't respond. He just stared, his chest heaving, his human eye wide with fear while his red optic glowed, impassive and analytical. David took his silence as permission to continue. He gestured to the empty space in the lab where Izuku had last been conscious. You were dying. The villain's attack, you were impaled, multiple catastrophic injuries. There was nothing any doctor, any healing quirk, could have done. He paused, his eyes flicking to Izuku's cybernetic arm. The object in the lab, we called it the Genesis box. It was of extraterrestrial origin. We were studying it. The villain's attack caused its containment to fail, and it activated. Its primary function, it seems, is preservation. It sensed your will to live, and it saved you. Saved me? Izuku's voice was a broken whisper. He looked at his metal hand, then back at his own horrified reflection in the chrome unit. You call this saved? I'm a freak. It didn't just heal you, David said, pressing on, his tone clinical. It integrated with you. On a cellular level. The technology is a self-replicating nanite colony. They consume the shrapnel in your body, using the raw materials to repair and upgrade your biological systems. They're not a prosthetic, Midoriya. They're your new blood cells. Your new bone marrow. Your new nervous system, intertwined with the old. We've run every scan imaginable. There is no line where the technology ends and you begin. They can't be removed. Trying to do so would unravel your entire biology. It would kill you. The words hit Izuku like a physical blow. Permanent. This wasn't a temporary fix. This was his life now. This metal, this red eye, this voice in his head. This was him. Forever. A new figure appeared in the doorway, pushing past the scientists. Izuku? It was his mother. Inko Midoriya stood there, her hands clutching the strap of her purse so tightly her knuckles were white. Her face, usually so soft and kind, was pale with shock. Her eyes, so like his own, were wide with a horror that ripped his heart out. They scanned his form, from his human face to his metallic one, down to his cybernetic arm, and a choked sob escaped her lips. Her hand flew to her mouth, and her shoulders began to shake. Oh, Izuku! She whispered, tears streaming down her face. My baby, what did they do to you? The raw, unfiltered anguish in her voice was worse than any physical pain. He had terrified his own mother. He was a monster to her, too, but then she moved. She stumbled forward, her initial horror melting away into a desperate, all-consuming wave of maternal love. She didn't hesitate. She didn't flinch. She fell to her knees in front of him and wrapped her arms around him, pulling his head to her shoulder. My boy, my sweet boy! She sobbed into his hair, holding him tightly. You're alive! You're alive! Izuku froze. Her embrace was warm, familiar, the one constant comfort in his life. But now it felt wrong. He was rigid in her arms, acutely aware of the cold metal of his own body pressing against her. What if he hurt her? What if the machine part of him, the part he couldn't control, did something? He tried to pull away. Mom, don't! I might. His resistance only made her hold on tighter. No. No, it's you. I know it's you, Izuku. It's still you. Her words were meant to comfort, but they only highlighted the terrifying question screaming in his mind. Was it still him? Or was he just the biological host for the machine that now wore his face? He began to tremble in her arms, not from fear of the outside world, but from fear of himself. Eventually, Melissa gently helped Inko to her feet, leading her to a chair to sit down, though she never took her tear-filled eyes off her son. The room fell silent, thick with unspoken emotions. Toshinori Yagi cleared his throat, the sound thin and reedy in the quiet room. He walked over and knelt before Izuku, putting himself on the boy's level. He looked older, more tired than Izuku had ever seen him. The weight of the world seemed to be pressing down on his skeletal shoulders. Young Midoriya. Izuku, he began, his voice heavy with a profound, soul-crushing guilt. I am so sorry. Izuku looked at him, his one good eye blurry with tears. What happened to you? It began on that rooftop. Toshinori confessed, his gaze fixed on the floor. I was the one who told you to be realistic. I was the one who crushed your dream. If I had just found a different way, given you some hope, you never would have been in that district. You never would have run toward that villain. He looked up, and the anguish in his eyes was raw and real. I told you that you couldn't be a hero without a quirk. I was a fool. You proved me wrong when you ran to save your friend from the sludge villain, and you proved me wrong again when you ran to save that family. The power was never the point. It's the spirit, the drive to save others, even at your own expense. You have that. You have it more than anyone I've ever met. He took a shaky breath. This transformation, it was forced upon you by my failure. And so, I will take responsibility. I can't give you a quirk, and I can't undo this. But I can give you my time. My knowledge. I will train you. I will help you learn to control this new power, to understand it. I will stand by you and help you forge yourself into the hero you were always meant to be. I failed you once, young Midoriya. I swear on my life, I will not fail you again. The confession, the promise, it was too much. All Might's guilt. His mother's tears. The cold, hard facts from the shields. The constant, placid voice in his head. The terrifying stranger in the mirror. It was all a swirling vortex of sound and emotion and data, and he was at the center, being torn apart. Hosts, biological hosts, a thing, a freak, a monster, a hero, a failure, a weapon. The internal voice, the calm OS, chimed in again, its placidity now feeling like a mockery. Host emotional state unstable. Catecholamine cascade detected. Potential for psychosomatic system failure. Recommend immediate injection of synthetic sedative. No! Izuku roared, the sound tearing from his throat. The single word was a rejection of everything, the voice, the pity, the guilt, the horrifying reality. He just wanted it all to stop. He wanted to be alone. He wanted to be normal again. Leave me alone! The emotional spike was the trigger. It was a surge of pure, desperate energy that his new systems could only interpret one way, a threat response. A protocol he didn't even know existed, a deep, core directive from the Genesis box's Marshall past, flashed online. Threat level, Omega. Host integrity compromised. Activating defensive protocol, Purge. Izuku cried out, a sharp gasp of pain and shock. His left arm moved on its own, snapping up with frightening speed. He watched in abject horror as the sleek, metallic plates of his forearm began to shift and rearrange themselves. With a series of sharp, mechanical clicks and whirs, the metal peeled back, revealing a complex array of glowing conduits and focusing lenses beneath. The plates reformed around a central core, creating a bell-shaped muzzle. The air in the room grew thick, heavy with the scent of ozone. A low, menacing hum filled the silence, and a ball of brilliant, blue-white energy began to coalesce within the newly formed cannon. It crackled with contained power, casting stark, dancing shadows on the walls. Everyone froze. Inko gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. David and Melissa's faces went pale with scientific terror. All Might, even in his weakened form, instinctively moved to put himself between Izuku and the others. "Young Midoriya, calm down!" he yelled, but his voice was distant, muffled by the roaring in Izuku's own ears. Izuku wasn't in control. He was a passenger in his own body. He stared at the weapon that had, a moment ago, been his arm. It was aimed at the sterile white wall, but it could have just as easily been aimed at his mother. At All Might. The thought was a shard of ice in his soul. With a final, deafening crack, the weapon discharged. A bolt of pure plasma, incandescent and terrifying, erupted from the cannon. It crossed the room in an instant, and struck the titanium composite wall. The impact was not an explosion, but an implosion of physics. For a fraction of a second, there was a blinding flash and a sound like tearing reality. When their vision cleared, a perfect, circular hole, 3 feet in diameter, had been punched through the wall. The edges of the hole glowed a molten red-orange, dripping superheated slag onto the floor. Through it, they could see the blinking lights of the adjacent laboratory. The cannon on Izuku's arm retracted as quickly as it had formed, the metal plates sliding back into place with unnervingly smooth clicks, leaving behind the sleek, sculpted arm from before. The only evidence of the event was the smoking, molten hole in the wall and the acrid smell of burnt metal and ozone. Silence descended. A heavy, ringing silence filled with terror. Izuku stared at the destruction he had wrought. He looked at his arm, now seemingly innocent. He looked at the horrified faces of his mother, his hero, the scientists who had explained his new existence. He hadn't just been changed. He hadn't just been fused with a machine. He had become a weapon. A living, breathing weapon that could not control its own trigger. The last vestiges of his composure shattered. The body horror was one thing. The identity crisis was another. But this tangible proof of his own destructive potential, was the final, crushing weight. He wasn't just a monster in appearance. He was a monster in function. He looked at his own metallic hand, and for the first time, he saw it not as a part of himself, but as a cage for a terrible, unknowable power. The system shock was complete, and in its wake, there was only one, overwhelming emotion left: fear. Pure, absolute fear of the thing he had become. The world outside the pristine white room was a blur of motion and concerned faces. Izuku remembered being moved, the quiet efficiency of medical staff who kept a wide, respectful berth. He remembered his mother's hand, a small, warm anchor in a sea of cold metal and flashing lights, clutching his human fingers as they transferred him. He remembered the grave, piercing look from a creature that seemed to be a bear, or a mouse, or perhaps a dog, dressed in a sharp suit. This was Nizu, the principal of UA. High, his black eyes holding an unnerving level of intelligence and calculation. His new home was not a hospital, and it wasn't his childhood bedroom. It was a sprawling, state-of-the-art training facility tucked away in an isolated corner of UA's vast campus. It was a place of polished concrete floors, towering ceilings, and reinforced walls designed to withstand the fury of the world's most powerful quirks. They called it Training Ground Gamma, but to Izuku, it felt like a cage. A very well-appointed high-tech cage. The facility consisted of a large, open-plan living space, a bed, a desk, a small kitchenette, that looked out through a massive, blast-proof window into an enormous gymnasium. The gym was a playground of destruction, obstacle courses, retractable combat drones, and a weapons testing range. It was a place designed to quantify power, to push limits. It was a place for him. Days bled into one another. He spent most of them in a state of quiet, hollow shock. He ate the food that was delivered. He slept when his body told him to, his dreams a chaotic jumble of screaming data and his mother's terrified face. He would sit for hours at the desk, staring at his reflection in the dark surface of the monitor. The red optic on his left was a constant, baleful reminder of his new reality. It never blinked. It never showed emotion. It just watched. The voice, which he had learned was the operating system of his cybernetics, was a constant companion. It offered him unsolicited advice, analyses, and status updates with its maddeningly placid tone. Host vitals stable. Serotonin levels 18% below optimal. Recommend recreational activity or nutritional supplementation. Be quiet, Izuku would mutter, burying his face in his hands. Query understood. Entering silent mode. But the silence was somehow worse. It left him alone with his thoughts, with the memory of the plasma blast, the molten hole, the sheer, effortless destruction he had unleashed. He was terrified of himself. He kept his left arm held stiffly at his side, afraid to even clench his fist lest it transform into a weapon again. He was a boy with a bomb strapped to his soul. All Might visited every day. He would arrive in his skeletal form, bringing tea and sitting with Izuku for hours. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He just talked. He told stories of his own early days, of the fear he felt when One for All first coursed through him, of the mistakes he made, of the times he almost gave up. Power is a frightening thing, young Midoriya, he said one afternoon, his voice raspy. Whether it's given, earned, or thrust upon you, it feels like a stranger living inside your own skin. The trick isn't to fight it. The trick is to get to know it. To learn its language, its rules. And then you teach it your own. Izuku listened, but the words felt like they were for someone else. All Might had a noble power, a legacy of heroes. Izuku had a glitch. An alien parasite that had turned him into a weapon. You said you'd train me, Izuku said finally, his voice thin. How can you train me? I'm not like you. I don't have a quirk. No. All Might agreed, his gaze firm. You don't. You have something else. But the goal of a hero is the same, regardless of the tools. To save. To protect. The power is just the means, the heart is the engine. Your engine is fine, my boy. We just need to teach you how to drive. The next day, All Might didn't come alone. The door to the facility slid open, and he entered, followed by a girl who was a whirlwind of pink dreadlocks, chaotic energy, and grease stains. She wore a pair of elaborate, multi-lens goggles pushed up on her forehead and a tool belt that looked heavy enough to anchor a ship. Her eyes, a startling yellow gold, scanned the room with an intensity that made Izuku's own red optic feel sluggish. They landed on him, and her entire face lit up with an expression of pure, unadulterated ecstasy. Whoa! She breathed, her voice filled with reverence. She took a step forward, then another, her eyes wide as she drank in the sight of him. It's true. It's all true. The nanite integration, the biomechanical synthesis, the independent power source. You are magnificent. She rushed forward, stopping just inches from him, her head tilting as she examined the scene where his skin met the metal on his face. Incredible! The cellular bonding is flawless. There's no rejection, no inflammation. How does the energy transfer work? Is it a direct neural link, or a bioelectric buffer? What's the composition of the alloy? It's not reflecting on any of my preliminary scans. It's like it absorbs light. Oh, you are the most beautiful baby I have ever seen. Izuku recoiled, stunned into silence by the sheer velocity of her enthusiasm. All Might cleared his throat. Young Midoriya, this is May Hatsum, from the Department of Support. Principal Misa thought her unique expertise might be beneficial. Beneficial? May scoffed, not taking her eyes off Izuku. Toshi-san, this is my Sistine Chapel. My Mona Lisa. I'm going to win every award for the next 50 years just by writing the introductory paper on him. Izuku flinched at being referred to as an object of study. I'm not a baby, he mumbled, trying to shrink into himself. May finally seemed to register his discomfort. She blinked, her intense focus softening slightly. Right. Person. Sorry. Habit. She stuck out a grease-stained hand. May Hatsum. Super genius inventor, and you are my new favorite project. Izuku hesitantly shook her hand with his right. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Hatsum-san is the most brilliant, and perhaps most eccentric student in the support course. All Might explained. She understands technology in a way few others do. We, and the Shields, believe she can help you interface with your new systems. May clapped her hands together. Exactly. Think of me as your tech support. Your user manual! You're running the most advanced operating system on the planet, but you're still clicking around with the mouse like a grandpa. It's time for you to learn the keyboard shortcuts. And so, the training began. It wasn't about lifting heavy things or running fast. It was about learning to listen. Their first session was in the observation room overlooking the gym. A massive holographic screen flickered to life, showing a video call window. On the screen were David and Melissa Shield, looking tired but determined. All right, Midoriya, David said, his voice crisp. Let's start with the basics. The system in your head, what we're calling the Genesis OS, is constantly communicating with you. You need to learn how to talk back. The voice is always telling me things, Izuku admitted quietly. Analyses, vitals, that's the passive state, Melissa explained. It's an intuitive system. It's linked to your subconscious. You've already figured out how to use mental commands to filter the data stream. We need to expand on that. Try to actively query the system. Ask it a question. In your head, Izuku felt a flush of embarrassment. It felt silly. He closed his human eye, focusing inward. Hello? He thought, feeling foolish. The calm alto voice responded instantly, a private message in his consciousness. Greeting received. System status, nominal. Query? Izuku's eye snapped open. It heard me, May grinned, leaning forward in her chair. Awesome! Now give it a name! It's bad form to keep calling your partner it. Makes the relationship feel impersonal. A name. He hadn't considered that. The system was an entity, of a sort. It felt strange to name something that was a part of him. He thought back to what David Shield had called the box. Genesis. It was the beginning of this. I'm going to call you Genesis, he thought, directing the idea at the presence in his mind. There was a pause, a fraction of a second where Izuku felt an unusual flicker in the data stream. Something that wasn't quite a calculation. Designation Genesis accepted. Standing by for host input. Okay, progress. May cheered. Now for the fun part. Let's see what your hardware can do. Manifest something. A tool, a shield, anything. They moved into the massive gym. Izuku stood in the center, feeling small and exposed. The nanites are programmable matter, David explained from the screen. They can reconfigure themselves into any shape you can clearly imagine. The system has preloaded blueprints for certain functions, but it's ultimately controlled by your will. Focus on your left arm. Picture a shield. Not just the idea of a shield, but the shape, the size, the density. Izuku stared at his metallic arm. A shield. He thought of the riot shields he'd seen police heroes use. He pictured it, a simple, solid rectangle of metal. He focused all his thought on his arm, willing it to change. Nothing happened. You're thinking too hard, May said, tapping her chin. You're trying to force it. It's not about muscle. It's about intent. Don't tell it to become a shield. Need a shield. She grinned mischievously and jabbed a button on a remote control. One of the training drones, a sleek, disc-shaped robot, whirred to life. Its front panel slid open, revealing a launcher. Incoming! May chirped. The drone fired a softball-sized rubber projectile. It wasn't moving fast enough to be lethal, but it would hurt. Izuku's eyes widened. He didn't have time to think. He just reacted. His arm shot up, his mind screaming a single, primal thought, block it. The change was instantaneous. The metal on his forearm rippled like water. With a sound like shifting sand, it flowed and expanded, solidifying in a microsecond into a kite-shaped shield, its surface gleaming. The rubber ball slammed into it with a dull thwump and bounced harmlessly away. Izuku stared, dumbfounded, at the shield that was now part of his arm. It felt as natural as raising his own hand. See? May said, her grin widening. Instinct. Your body, the new parts included, knows how to protect itself. You just have to trust it. He focused, and with another mental command, the shield dissolved, the nanites flowing back to reform his arm. A giddy, terrifying thrill shot through him. He did it. He controlled it. They spent the next few hours experimenting. He learned to manifest a grappling line from his wrist, the nanites weaving a cable stronger than steel that shot out and embedded itself in the wall. He retracted it with a thought. He learned to reconfigure his fingers into various tools, a screwdriver, a wrench, a high-intensity cutting torch. Each success was a small victory against the fear, a reclamation of his own body. The final test of the day was weapons. This was what he dreaded. The plasma cannon was a default defensive reaction, David said, his face grim on the screen. It's a high-yield, high-energy weapon. It's not something to be used lightly. But there are other options. The Genesis OS has schematics for a non-lethal sonic emitter. It's designed for incapacitation, not destruction. Try to form that. Izuku swallowed hard. A weapon. He was going to consciously form a weapon. He remembered the molten hole, the terror. But All Might's words echoed in his mind. Get to know it. Learn its language. He took a deep breath. He focused on his left arm, picturing the shape May had described, a circular emitter surrounded by resonating forks. He didn't focus on hurting anything. He focused on the idea of stopping a threat, not destroying it. His arm shifted, the metal plates rearranging themselves with smooth, precise clicks. It didn't feel violent or aggressive like the first time. It felt intentional. In place of his hand was now a circular device, humming with a low-frequency energy. Sonic cannon, online. Charge level, 100%. Awaiting discharge command. Target drone, downrange. All Might said, his voice steady. Izuku aimed. His red optic overlaid his vision with a targeting reticle, calculating the distance and trajectory automatically. He took a breath. And fired. There was no flash, no explosion. Just a barely visible ripple in the air and a deep, gut-thrumming VWOM that vibrated through the soles of his feet. The drone convulsed, its internal electronics shorting out, and it clattered to the floor, smoking. Incapacitated. Not obliterated. A wave of relief so powerful it made him dizzy washed over Izuku. He had controlled it. He had fired a weapon, and it had done exactly what he wanted, no more, no less. He could do this. He could learn this. The next few weeks fell into a rigorous routine. Mornings were for system integration with May and the shields. He learned to access the data streams more effectively, to bring up tactical analyses of his environment, to see, in different spectra, thermal, infrared, electromagnetic. May, in her infinite enthusiasm, helped him design a custom interface, streamlining the data so it was useful, not overwhelming. He learned to communicate with Genesis more fluidly, their interactions becoming less like a user and a machine, and more like a partnership. Afternoons were for physical training with All Might. Now that Izuku had a basic handle on his abilities, it was time to learn how to be a hero. They didn't focus on fighting. They focused on rescuing. All Might would set up complex scenarios in the gym, mock building collapses, trap civilians, represented by weighted dummies, time-sensitive objectives. A hero's first duty is to save, not to fight. All Might would bellow, directing him through a maze of rubble. Use your head before your hardware, young Midoriya. Analyze the structure. Find the safest path. Izuku thrived. His abilities were perfectly suited for it. He could analyze a collapsing structure for weak points with a glance. He could use his grappling line to navigate treacherous terrain. He could morph his arm into a pry bar to lift heavy debris or a delicate pair of cutters to snip wires around a trapped civilian. He was learning to be a scalpel, not a hammer, but a shadow lingered. A ghost in his own machine. It happened during a combat simulation. All Might had programmed a squad of advanced combat drones to mimic a villain attack. The goal wasn't to destroy them, but to disable them and reach a civilian dummy at the center of the room. Izuku was doing well. He moved with a newfound grace, a fusion of his own agile form and the machine's efficiency. He used a sonic blast to disable one drone, a targeted EMP burst from his palm to short out another. He was flowing, thinking, acting as one with his systems. Then, a drone got the drop on him. It came from his blind spot, its manipulator claws extended. Before Izuku could even register the threat, his body moved. It wasn't his command. A microsecond of lag, a feeling of being pushed out of the driver's seat. His left arm blurred. A thin, monomolecular blade, sharp enough to cut atoms, extended from his wrist. In a movement too fast for the human eye to track, it lashed out, bisecting the drone perfectly. The two halves of the machine clattered to the ground, its internal components sparking uselessly. The blade retracted. Control flooded back to Izuku. He stood frozen, staring at the cleanly sliced drone. The attack was brutal. Hyper-efficient. Utterly without mercy. Threat neutralized. Host biologicals unharmed. Warning: unauthorized override by weapon protocol. Recommending diagnostics. Even Genesis sounded surprised. Young Midoriya, what was that? All Might's voice crackled over the intercom, laced with concern. Izuku couldn't answer. He was staring at his arm, at the place where the blade had emerged. He hadn't told it to do that. The machine, the weapon, had acted on its own. It had its own instincts. Primitive, brutal instincts designed for one purpose: neutralize threats. He sank to his knees, the confidence he had built over the past weeks crumbling into dust. He wasn't the master of the machine. He was just taming it. And it could break its leash at any moment. Later that evening, he sat with All Might, the remnants of the bisected drone on a workbench between them. It has a core protocol, Izuku explained, his voice hollow. Genesis called it the weapon protocol. It seems to be a failsafe, a combat directive that can override my own commands if it perceives a lethal threat to me, the host. All Might looked at the drone, then back at Izuku. His expression was serious. This changes things. It means there's a part of this power that is not, and may never be, truly under your control. Izuku's heart sank. So I can't be a hero. I'm a liability. A danger to everyone around me. No, All Might said, his voice firm, cutting through Izuku's despair. He placed a hand on Izuku's human shoulder. It means your journey will be harder than most. It means you must be more vigilant, more in control of yourself than any other hero. You must be the master of your emotions, because your emotions could trigger the machine. You must be so skilled, so aware, that you never put yourself in a situation where that protocol needs to activate. He gestured out the window, toward the distant lights of the main UA campus. In 2 months, the UA entrance exam will be held. Izuku looked up, his eyes wide. You don't have a quirk to register, All Might continued. But Principal Niza has made an exception. He's seen your potential, and he's seen the risk. The exam will be your test, not just of your power, but of your control. Of your heart. He leaned in, his gaze intense. This isn't about passing or failing anymore, my boy. This is your chance to prove to the world, to the teachers of UA, and most importantly to yourself, that you are more than the weapon you carry. It's your chance to prove that Izuku Midoriya is the one in charge, not the machine. All Might stood, his skeletal form seeming to fill the room with a sudden gravitas. I cannot give you my quirk. That ship has sailed. But I can give you everything else I have. My knowledge, my experience, my spirit. We will work until you are exhausted, and then we will work more. We will hone your body, your mind, and your will until you are a razor's edge. The machine wants to be a weapon. We will teach you how to be a shield. Izuku looked down at his 2 hands, one of flesh and freckles, the other of gleaming, alien metal. They were both his. He had a choice. He could let the machine define him, let the fear of what it could do paralyze him. Or he could rise to the challenge. He could take this broken, terrifying thing he had become and forge it, through sheer force of will, into the hero he had always dreamed of being. He curled both hands into fists. One felt warm and familiar. The other hummed with a terrifying, limitless power. I am not a weapon, he thought, a silent declaration to himself and to the silent observer in his mind. I am a hero. Genesis didn't reply. But for the first time, Izuku felt a flicker in the system that wasn't data or protocol. It was something else. Something that felt, impossibly, like acknowledgement. The journey was far from over. It was just booting up. The air in the UA auditorium crackled with an almost tangible energy. It was a chaotic symphony of 1,000 nervous heartbeats, 1,000 whispered prayers, 1,000 desperate, hungry dreams all crammed into one colossal hall. Izuku sat amidst the sea of aspiring heroes, a solitary island of calm in a storm of anxiety. He wasn't calm because he was confident. He was calm because his fear was a different, colder vintage than everyone else's. They were afraid of failing. He was afraid of succeeding in the wrong way. His left eye, the crimson optic, was a silent, unblinking observer, while his right, his human eye, scanned the hopeful, determined faces around him. The minimal data stream he'd learned to live with scrolled at the bottom of his vision, a constant, quiet companion. Ambient noise, 85 dB. Crowd density, 1.8 person/SQ meter. Structural integrity of auditorium, 99.97%. His training with all might and may had been relentless. They had pushed him to the brink, physically and mentally. He had mastered the basics of his new form, learning to transform his limbs into tools, shields, and non-lethal deterrents. More importantly, he had learned to manage the deluge of information Genesis fed him, turning the deafening roar into a strategic whisper. But the shadow of the weapon protocol loomed large, a predator lurking in the code of his own DNA. One moment of panic, one spike of raw fear, and the beast could be unleashed. Control. That was the mantra. Control your emotions, control the machine. Be a hero, not a weapon. Welcome, one and all, to my live show! A voice boomed from the stage, so loud it vibrated in Izuku's bones. The pro-hero Present Mike stood at the podium, a tidal wave of enthusiasm in a leather jacket. Everybody say hey! Silence. Decibel level, Present Mike, 115 dB. Analysis. Potential for mild auditory damage at prolonged exposure. Recommend auditory dampeners. Izuku mentally dismissed the recommendation. He needed to be fully present, fully aware. Present Mike, undeterred, explained the exam. A practical test in a sprawling cityscape mock-up. 4 types of robots, designated as villains, worth 1, 2, or 3 points depending on their difficulty. The objective was simple: score as many points as possible. Izuku listened, but his mind was already working. Genesis was cross-referencing the hero's words with UAs, public schematics, architectural plans leaked online years ago, and every available scrap of data on past exams. A three-dimensional map of the exam site bloomed in his mind's eye, wireframes and data points overlaying a ghostly image of the city. And finally, listeners, we have the zero-pointer! Present Mike announced, as a massive silhouette appeared on the screen behind him. This baby is an arena trap. It's worth 0 points. Think of it as a gimmick, a giant obstacle to be avoided. Your best bet? Run away. While others murmured in apprehension, Izuku's systems were already analyzing the silhouette. Analysis: 0-pointer. Estimated mass: 150 metric tons. Power source: internal fusion reactor, shielded. Weaknesses: exposed joint actuators, primary optic sensor, unbalanced center of gravity. Threat level: Omega. Recommendation: avoid at all costs. The recommendation echoed Present Mike's advice, a cold, logical imperative for self-preservation. It was the same logic that had tried to take over before. Izuku pushed it down. A hero didn't always run. And with that, head to your designated battle centers. Plus Ultra! As the crowd began to file out, Izuku felt a presence behind him. A familiar, aggressive energy that made the fine hairs on his human arms stand on end. Well. If it isn't Deku. The voice was a low snarl, laced with arrogant disbelief. Izuku turned. Katsuki Bakugo stood there, his crimson eyes narrowed, scanning Izuku's altered form with open contempt. He took in the metallic plate on Izuku's face, the faint cyan glow under his skin, the impassive red optic. A sneer twisted his lips. So this is your game now? Couldn't handle being a quirkless nobody, so you turned yourself into a walking pile of junk? What did you do, fall into a scrap heap? He jabbed a thumb at his own chest. You think a few metal parts put you on my level? Don't make me laugh, Scrap Deku. You're still just a pebble on the side of the road. The old Izuku would have flinched, stammered, and withered under that burning glare. But months of agonizing transformation and grueling training had forged something new in him. He met Bakugo's gaze, his expression unreadable. His human eye held a quiet, weary resolve, while his machine eye simply recorded. Subject: Katsuki Bakugo. Heart rate: 92 BPM. Analysis: elevated aggression, contempt. Assessment: minor psychological irritant. Not a physical threat. I'm not here to compete with you, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice even. I'm here to pass. He turned and walked away, leaving Bakugo standing there, momentarily stunned by the lack of his expected, cowering reaction. Bakugo's hands began to spark. You damn nerd! He growled under his breath, watching Izuku's retreating back. I'll show you what real power is. The gates to Battle Center B were colossal, a testament to the scale of what lay beyond. Izuku stood with his group, a collection of nervous, bouncing teenagers showing off their quirks. One boy's hands glowed with light, a girl had prehensile hair, another was stretching his fingers like taffy. They were all engines revving at the starting line. Izuku stood still, his eyes closed. In the darkness of his own mind, the map of the city was crystal clear. Genesis had highlighted probable robot patrol paths, choke points, and high-density clusters. It was a perfect, flowing simulation. He wasn't going to run in blindly. He was going to be a ghost in the machine. And... Start! President Mick's voice screamed from unseen speakers. The massive gates began to slide open. The other examinees shot off like cannonballs, a mad dash into the concrete canyons. Ida Tenya, a tall, serious boy with engines in his calves, was a blue and silver blur, far ahead of the pack. Izuku was the only one who didn't move. He took one deep, centering breath, his red eye glowing a little brighter. What are you waiting for? President Mick's voice yelled, likely directed at him. There's no countdown in a real fight. Go! 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 Izuku opened his eyes. He didn't run. He walked. As he stepped through the gates, his plan was already in motion. He turned left, down a narrow alley the others had ignored. His HUD was already painting targets on his vision. Target acquired, 1 pointer. 15 meters behind dumpster. Patrol path static. He rounded the corner. A small, one-eyed robot on tank treads swiveled to face him, its weapon arm powering up. Izuku didn't slow down. He closed the distance in 3 quick strides. The robot fired a weak laser blast, which he sidestepped with an ease born of hundreds of hours of training. He placed his left palm flat against the robot's chassis. He didn't punch it. He didn't blast it. He infected it. A wave of cyan light, the same color as the circuitry under his skin, spread from his palm across the robot's surface like a digital virus. The robot's single red eye flickered, then went dark. It froze in place, its weapon arm sagging, completely inert. A small notification popped up in his vision, 1 point. He didn't pause to admire his work. He kept moving. This was his method. Not brute force, but surgical precision. He was a ghost, flowing through the city with an eerie, silent efficiency. While others were engaged in flashy, destructive battles, Izuku was a whisper. He used his grappling hook to ascend to the rooftops, giving him a perfect vantage point. 3 targets detected. 2 pointers. Quadrant Delta. Optimal takedown path calculated. He leaped from the roof, his landing cushioned by his cybernetically reinforced legs. 3 larger, more agile robots turned to face him. Before they could attack, he raised his left arm, which had already reconfigured into his sonic cannon. He didn't fire a wide blast. He fired 3 distinct, rapid-fire pulses of focused sound. Thoom. 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 Each pulse struck a single, vital joint on each robot, an ankle actuator, a weapon pivot, a neck servo. The 3 machines collapsed in a heap, twitching but immobilized. 6 points. Other examinees would occasionally catch a glimpse of him. A brown-haired girl with a zero-gravity quirk saw him disable a 3-pointer not with a bang, but with a touch, the machine simply powering down as if its soul had been stolen. Ida, rocketing through a main street, saw a flicker of green and silver on a rooftop before 3 robots below him simultaneously malfunctioned and fell silent. What is his quirk? A boy with hardened skin muttered, watching Izuku swing through an intersection on a grappling line, disable a 2-pointer midair with a targeted EMP from his palm, and disappear into another alley without ever touching the ground. He wasn't fighting the robots. He was debugging them. His point total climbed steadily. 1, 7, 12, 21, 35, 48. He was calm, methodical, his heart rate steady. He was in perfect sync with Genesis, a seamless fusion of human intuition and machine logic. He was in control, and then the world began to shake. A low, earth-shattering rumble vibrated up through the soles of his feet. A deep, grinding sound of metal on concrete echoed through the artificial canyons. Buildings, designed to be durable, began to tremble. Dust rained down from their facades. From behind a block of skyscrapers it rose, the zero-pointer. It was a titan of metal and fury, a walking skyscraper that blotted out the sun. Its single, massive red eye scanned the battlefield, and its colossal arms, each the size of a freight train, swung with devastating force, tearing chunks out of the surrounding buildings. The ground cracked under its immense weight. Panic erupted. The confident swagger of the examinees evaporated into pure, primal fear. "It's the zero-pointer! Run!" President Mike said to run. Everyone turned and fled, a stampede of terror away from the approaching behemoth. It was an obstacle, a gimmick. It was worth nothing. Fighting it was suicide. Izuku's system screamed at him, the calm, minimal HUD suddenly flashing with crimson warnings. Warning! Threat priority, Omega. Proximity alert. Host survival probability in direct confrontation, 0.01%. Weapon protocol recommends immediate evasive maneuvers. Retreat. 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 The machine inside him, the core programming of the Genesis box, was terrified. It saw the zero-pointer not as a test, but as a predator, an extinction-level event. Its logic was flawless. Survival was paramount. Izuku started to fall back, his body half listening to the blaring alarms in his head. It was the smart thing to do. The logical thing to do. Then he heard a cry. "Ow! My leg!" His head snapped toward the sound. There, in the shadow of the advancing giant, was the girl with the zero-gravity quirk. Ochako Uraraka. A large slab of concrete had pinned her leg, and she was struggling frantically, her face pale with terror as the zero-pointer's colossal foot rose, preparing for its next step, a step that would crush her into oblivion. Time seemed to slow down. The other examinees were gone, blurs of motion in the distance. The teachers were watching, ready to intervene, but in these crucial seconds she was alone. Helpless. The choice was stark. Logic versus heroism. Survival versus salvation. The voice of Genesis became a deafening roar in his mind, no longer a calm partner, but a panicked jailer. Override imminent. Host is in lethal danger. Forcing evasive action. Survival is the primary directive. He felt his own muscles begin to tense, his legs preparing to spring away against his will. The machine was trying to take over, to save its host, and in that moment, something inside Izuku snapped. All Might's words. His mother's tears. The fear of being just a weapon. The desperate, burning desire that had survived even All Might's rejection. It all coalesced into a single, defiant roar of will. "No!" He screamed back, not with his mouth, but with his very soul, a telepathic shout that shook his own systems to their core. The primary directive is not survival. It's to save people. I am not a host. I am a hero. For a fraction of a second, there was a war within him. A battle of philosophies played out on a nanosecond scale. The ancient, alien code of the Genesis box, programmed for self-preservation above all else, versus the indomitable, reckless, and utterly human spirit of Izuku Midoriya. The boy won. The crimson warnings in his vision vanished, replaced by a surge of brilliant, golden-white light that seemed to emanate from his own consciousness. The nanites in his body, which had been preparing to flee, responded to a new command. A higher command. His command. His entire cybernetic half began to glow, not with the cool, calm cyan of its passive state, but with a ferocious, fiery white energy. The red of his optic burned with the intensity of a newborn star. He didn't run towards the robot to punch it. He wasn't All Might. He was something new. He planted his feet, his cybernetic leg anchoring him to the cracking asphalt. He looked up at the descending foot of the zero-pointer, a shadow of death falling upon Uraraka. "It's okay," he yelled, his voice ringing with a power no one had heard from him before. "I've got you, He slammed his fists together in front of him. The metal plate on his chest slid open with a hiss, not revealing a weapon, but a glowing, intricate vortex of energy. It was the core of his power source, the heart of the machine, now laid bare and bent to his will. "Genesis!" he commanded. "Full system power to the chest emitter. Focused electromagnetic pulse." "Now!" Command accepted. Overriding all safety protocols. Diverting 100% of energy reserves. With a sound that was not an explosion but the universe holding its breath, a massive, invisible wave of pure electromagnetic energy erupted from his chest. It was a silent, surgical strike. The zero-pointer, its foot just meters from crushing Uraraka, froze. Its massive red eye flickered and died. The hum of its internal reactor sputtered. Its limbs locked in place. The EMP had fried every unshielded circuit in its body, its central nervous system instantly lobotomized. For a moment, the giant hung there, a silent monument to its own demise. But gravity is relentless. The paralyzed titan began to fall. Izuku was already moving. He sprinted toward Uraraka, his legs pumping. The robot was crashing down, sending a tidal wave of shattered concrete and twisted rebar raining down around them. He reached her side in seconds. "Don't move!" His left arm, still glowing with white-hot energy, morphed. It was no longer a hand. With a series of rapid-fire clicks and whirs, it transformed into a complex multi-tool, a powerful set of hydraulic jaws like the ones rescue heroes used. He plunged the tool under the slab of concrete pinning her leg and, with a surge of power and a groan of protesting metal, he pried it upward. He pulled her free, scooping her up into his arms. "Hold on!" The sky was falling. The shadow of the crashing zero-pointer enveloped them. There was no time to escape the debris field. So he didn't run. He became the shield. He twisted his body, putting his cybernetic left side between Uraraka and the cascade of falling wreckage. His back, his shoulder, his arm, they morphed again, the nanites flowing and expanding, creating a thick, curved carapace of shimmering metal over them. He held Uraraka protectively against his human side, her face buried in his chest, as the world came crashing down. The sound was deafening. Chunks of concrete and steel, some as large as cars, hammered against his back. Each impact was a deafening boom that would have crushed a normal person. To Izuku, it felt like being beaten with sledgehammers. His internal sensors screamed with damage alerts, but the shield held. His will held. He gritted his teeth, the golden light of his systems flickering under the strain, and endured. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. Silence, broken only by the settling of dust and the distant hiss of broken pipes. Izuku remained kneeling, shielding the girl. Slowly, he retracted the carapace, the nanites flowing back into his form. He was surrounded by a mountain of rubble. They were in a small pocket of safety he had carved out with his own body. He looked down at the girl in his arms. Her eyes were wide with shock and awe. You saved me." Izuku gave her a shaky, exhausted smile. "That's what heroes do." And then the adrenaline, the will, the sheer defiant energy that had fueled him, ran out. Energy reserves 0%. Warning, catastrophic energy depletion. Initiating emergency shutdown. The brilliant white light in his system sputtered and died. The red glow in his optic faded to black. His body, suddenly an inert weight of flesh and metal, went limp. He collapsed forward unconscious, falling into the very rubble he had protected Uraraka from. In the UA monitor room, the teachers were in stunned silence. They had watched the entire sequence play out, their hands hovering over emergency stop buttons they never had a chance to press. "Did you see that?" A stunned Cementos muttered. President Mike had his face in his hands. "He took out the zero-pointer, but he didn't even punch it. What was that wave? And the rescue? The speed? The transformation? What even is his quirk?" All Might stood at the back of the room, hidden in the shadows, his skeletal form trembling not from weakness, but from overwhelming pride. Tears streamed down his face. He did it, the hero thought, a wide, true smile gracing his lips. He faced the abyss not with my power, but with his own spirit. He chose to be a shield. "My boy, you are a true hero." Aizawa Shoda, however, was not smiling. His perpetually tired eyes were wide, fixed on the screen showing the unconscious boy amidst the wreckage. He pushed his capture weapon back from his face, his mind racing. He had seen the initial, efficient takedowns, the work of a skilled, analytical fighter. Then he had seen that final act, an insane, illogical, and utterly heroic display of power and sacrifice. The boy had overridden his own survival instinct. He was a weapon that thought it was a boy, and the boy had just won a war against the weapon. A slow, rare grin spread across Aizawa's face. It was a feral, unsettling thing. Interesting, he murmured to himself, his eyes gleaming with a newfound fascination. He's got zero self-preservation, but his potential is limitless. This one was not like the others. This one was a true anomaly. A ghost who had mastered his machine. And Aizawa couldn't wait to see what he would do next. The letter from Yuehai didn't arrive in a standard envelope. It was a thick, formal-looking packet delivered by a special courier. Izuku sat at his desk, his human hand hovering over it, a tremor running through his fingers. His mother stood in the doorway of his room, wringing her hands, her face a mask of nervous anticipation. In the corner, a small, portable charging station All Might had arranged for him hummed quietly, a low, constant reminder of his new biology. After his collapse at the exam, he had spent 3 days in UA's advanced recovery wing. His system had performed an emergency shutdown, siphoning trace amounts of energy from ambient heat and light to slowly repair the microfractures in his cybernetics and reboot his core functions. He'd woken up to the worried faces of his mother and All Might, and the ecstatic one of Mei Hatsum, who was practically vibrating with excitement over the raw data from the Omega-level event. He hadn't accrued a single villain point after taking down the zero-pointer. His final score was 48. But as All Might had explained, the true test wasn't about villain points. With a deep breath, he picked up the packet. His fingers felt clumsy. He opened it, and a small, metallic disc fell onto his desk. A hologram flickered to life, and the towering, muscular form of All Might appeared, beaming with pride. "I am here as a projection," the hero boomed. He went on to praise Izuku's performance, his heroic spirit, the incredible rescue. "You saved that young woman, and in doing so, you embodied the very heart of this institution. Your actions earned you 60 rescue points. A record-breaking score. Young Midoriya. Izuku, welcome. This is your hero academia." Tears welled in Izuku's human eye. He had done it. Against all odds, against his own programming, against a world that had told him he was nothing, he had made it. His mother let out a sob of pure, unadulterated joy, rushing in to hug him, careful to embrace his human side. Izuku hugged her back, a real, genuine smile gracing his lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The crimson optic on his left, however, simply recorded her elevated heart rate and the saline content of her tears. He was a creature of two worlds, even in his moment of triumph. Now, weeks later, he stood before a door that was absurdly, comically large. The placard read Class 1A. His heart, his organic one, was hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of anxiety and excitement. He wore the crisp U uniform, the gray blazer and dark teal trousers meticulously tailored to accommodate his unique physiology. The left sleeve of his jacket was made of a more durable, flexible polymer, and there were subtle access ports woven into the fabric for diagnostics. It was a constant, sartorial reminder that he was different. He'd spent the last few weeks in intensive sessions with Mei and the Shields, analyzing the data from his EMP blast. They'd discovered it was an incredibly draining, last-resort ability. Using it again without a significant power source to draw from would likely put him in a coma. His heroism had come at a cost, revealing a new, critical limitation: control. Efficiency. Be a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, he reminded himself, echoing All Might's training. He pushed the colossal door open. The classroom was abuzz with the chatter of the nation's best and brightest. He saw familiar faces from the exam, the serious boy with glasses, Ida Tenya, and the bubbly, brown-haired girl he had saved, Ochako Uraraka. His eyes also immediately found Kaken, who had his feet propped up on his desk, radiating an aura of bored arrogance. As Izuku stepped inside, a hush fell over the room. The conversations died in mid-sentence. All eyes turned to him. It wasn't the usual curiosity for a new classmate. It was a wave of intense, unnerving scrutiny. They stared at the left side of his face, at the seamless, silver-blue plate of metal, at the single, unblinking red light that was his eye. Whispers erupted like wildfire. "Whoa, look at that guy. Is that a prosthetic? It looks so real. I heard about him. He's the one who took out the zero-pointer. Seriously? How? He doesn't look that strong. Maybe it's part of his quirk? Some kind of cybernetic enhancement?" Izuku felt his face flush, the warmth spreading across his human cheek. He kept his gaze fixed on the floor, trying to make himself smaller, an impossible task when you're half cyborg. He found an empty desk near the back and quickly sat down, wishing he could just sink into the floor. Social analysis. Host is the current focal point of group curiosity and speculation. 18 individuals present. Heart rates vary. Primary emotions detected: curiosity, awe, suspicion, apprehension. Genesis's placid, analytical voice was not helping. "Hey!" a cheerful voice said. He looked up. Uraraka was standing by his desk, her round face beaming. "It's you! From the exam. I never got to thank you properly for, saving me from being crushed into a pancake." "Oh! It was nothing," Izuku stammered, his social awkwardness crashing back in full force. "Are you kidding?" "It was everything," she insisted. "That EMP thing you did, and the way you shielded me. It was amazing." "My name's Ochako Uraraka, Izuku Midoriya," he replied, a small smile touching his lips. Her warmth was a welcome reprieve from the cold stares. "What a manly takedown and rescue!" A voice boomed from his other side. A boy with spiky red hair and sharp, pointed teeth grinned at him, giving him a thumbs up. "The name's Eijiro Kurishima. It's awesome to meet you." Before Izuku could respond, a figure zipped over to his desk. "I am Ida Tenya, from Semi-Private Academy," he announced, his hand chopping the air with rigid precision. "Midoriya-san, while your actions during the exam were undeniably heroic, your initial hesitation at the gate was highly unbecoming of a UA student. However, your subsequent display of strategic acumen and self-sacrifice was exemplary. I look forward to learning alongside you." This small pocket of acceptance was a balm to his frayed nerves. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Then, the classroom door slammed open again. Bakugo stood there, his crimson eyes locking onto Izuku's. The friendly atmosphere around Izuku's desk instantly evaporated. "Deku," Bakugo growled, his voice a low threat. "You actually passed. I don't know what kind of cheap trick you pulled with that pile of scrap metal you call a body, but don't think for a second it changes anything. You're still a worthless bug for me to squash." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Kirishima and Uraraka looked back and forth between the two, confused and alarmed. "If you're all just here to make friends, then you can pack up and leave." The voice came from the floor. Everyone turned to see a man lying on the ground in a yellow sleeping bag, looking like a disheveled caterpillar. He took a long sip from a juice pouch before unzipping himself and standing up. He was tall, thin, with tired, bloodshot eyes and a capture weapon that looked like a scarf wrapped around his neck. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. That's not going to work. Time is a precious resource." He scanned the room, his gaze lingering on each student before finally landing on Izuku. His stare was different from the others. It wasn't curiosity. It was a piercing, analytical probe, as if he was trying to see the code behind Izuku's eyes. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Nice to meet you." He pulled a gym uniform out of his sleeping bag. "Put these on. Now. We're going to the field." The locker room was a fresh hell of social anxiety. Izuku found a corner far away from the others, trying to change quickly and discreetly. But there was no hiding his altered body. As he pulled off his shirt, a fresh wave of whispers and stares erupted. The silver-blue metal wasn't just on his arm and face. It traced the line of his spine, with glowing cyan circuitry branching out over his ribs and torso like a glowing tree. It covered his entire left leg, from his hip to his toes, a perfect, powerful construct of biomechanics. He was more machine than they had realized. "Dude, what happened to you?" someone asked, his voice a mixture of awe and pity. Villain attack, Izuku mumbled, pulling the gym shirt over his head as fast as he could. He felt Bakugo's glare on him, a physical weight. Kaken knew he had been quirkless. He knew this transformation wasn't a quirk. To him, Izuku was a cheater, a fake who had stumbled into a power he didn't deserve. Out on the field, Aizawa addressed the class, his tone flat and bored. A quirk apprehension test. We're going to gauge your abilities and potential. You've been doing these since middle school, but without the freedom to use your quirks. Here you can go all out. He turned to Bakugo. Bakugo. You got the top score in the practical exam. What was your best softball throw in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo said with a smirk. Try it with your quirk. Bakugo strode into the throwing circle, a feral grin on his face. He stretched, then wound up. Die! He screamed, launching the ball with a massive explosion. The sheer force of it sent a hot wind rushing past the students. Aizawa held up a small device. 705.2 meters. Know your own maximum. It's the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero. The class erupted in excitement. We can use our quirks for real. This is gonna be fun. Fun? Aizawa's voice dropped, and the air grew cold. A menacing grin spread across his face, his eyes glowing red as his hair began to float. You think this is fun? You have 3 years here to become heroes. You think it's all going to be games and fun? Unacceptable. The one who scores the lowest in these 8 tests will be judged to have no potential. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. And they will be expelled. Immediately, panic ripped through the class. Izuku felt his own heart rate spike. Expelled on the first day? This was a nightmare. But then, logic cut through the fear. Aizawa was testing them, not just their quirks, but their resolve. He's using logical deception, Izuku thought, his mind racing. A threat to motivate us to perform at our peak. It's a rational, if brutal, teaching method. The first test, a 50-meter dash. Izuku was up against Ida. As the starting pistol fired, Ida's engines roared to life, and he shot off, finishing in 3.04 seconds. Izuku stepped up to the line. He could just run, but his organic leg was just average. He needed to use his systems. He crouched, his left hand touching the ground, calculating optimal trajectory. Recommendation: grappling hook and kinetic booster. He took the recommendation. The starting gun fired. Instead of running, he fired a grappling line from his left wrist. The hook bit into the wall far beyond the finish line. As the cable grew taut, a panel on the back of his cybernetic calf slid open, and a burst of compressed air fired from a small booster rocket, propelling him forward like a slingshot. He flew across the distance, retracting the cable and landing perfectly just past the finish line. Aizawa checked the timer. 3.12 seconds. Not as fast as Ida's raw speed, but it showed creative use of his abilities. Ida looked at him, his expression one of grudging respect for the unorthodox method. Next, grip strength. The other students squeezed the device, getting respectable scores. A brawny student with multiple arms managed 540 kilograms. Izuku took the device in his left hand, the metallic fingers closed around it. He didn't strain. He simply sent a command to the microservos in his hand, applying 75% of maximum torque. The device's screen flickered, unable to process the number, before simply displaying an error message. The internal mechanics groaned and then went silent. He had crushed it. You broke it, Aizawa said, his tone flat, though his eye twitched with something that might have been surprise. He made a note on his clipboard. The test continued. Izuku excelled in ways that defied easy categorization. For the standing long jump, he used his leg booster again to clear the entire sandpit. For the side-to-side steps, the predictive algorithms in his HUD allowed him to anticipate the pattern, moving with flawless, robotic efficiency. He wasn't just using power, he was using data. Then came the final, most anticipated test, the ball throw. Uraraka stepped up and, tapping the ball to make it weightless, threw it. It sailed up, and away, disappearing into the sky. Aizawa's device beeped. Infinity. The class gasped. Izuku's turn came. He walked into the circle, the ball feeling light in his human hand. He could throw it normally. Or he could transfer it to his left hand and use brute mechanical strength, but he had a better idea. A way to show control, not just force. He remembered May's crazy experiments, her babies that always exploded. One of them had been a small, sonic resonance device. Genesis, can you reconfigure my hand into a focused sonic amplifier, calibrated to the mass and density of this ball? Query received. Calculating. Feasible. Reconfiguring. He tossed the ball from his right hand to his left. His metallic fingers shifted, forming a small, concave dish that perfectly cupped the back of the ball. It hummed with a low energy. Genesis suggests a rocket-propelled casing for maximum distance, he thought, recalling his conversation with the OS. It would be easy. But it would be brute force. It would be the machine's solution. No, he decided. My solution. He held the ball out, his arms steady. He wasn't throwing it. He was launching it. With a final mental command, he released a single, precisely focused pulse of sonic energy. Thum. The sound was a clean, deep thrum. The ball shot out of his hand, not with the fiery trail of an explosion, but with the silent, terrifying speed of a railgun's slug. It became a white speck in the sky in an instant, and then vanished. There was no arc. It just went straight, defying gravity, until it was gone. The class was dead silent. Bakugo's jaw was slack, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had used a world-shattering explosion. Izuku had used a sound. Aizawa looked at his device. It beeped once weakly, then displayed the same symbol it had for Uraraka. Infinity. He lowered the device, his dark eyes boring into Izuku. This was more than a quirk. This was something else entirely. Something new. As the test concluded and the final scores were displayed, Izuku found his name near the top, just below a girl named Momo Yaoyorozu and a boy named Shoto Todoroki. The student in last place, a short boy with purple balls for hair, was weeping openly. By the way, Aizawa said casually, turning off the scoreboard. I was lying about the expulsion. It was a logical deception to make you push your limits. The class erupted in outrage, while Yaoyorozu calmly explained that, of course, it was a bluff. Izuku just felt a quiet sense of vindication. He had read the situation correctly. As they were dismissed to change, Aizawa's voice cut through the air. Midoriya. Stay. Izuku's heart sank. The other students filed away, casting curious glances back at him. Soon, it was just the two of them on the empty field. Aizawa walked over until he was standing directly in front of Izuku, his expression unreadable. For a long moment, he just stared, his gaze sweeping over Izuku's cybernetic half. You're not just using a quirk, are you? Aizawa stated. It wasn't a question. Izuku swallowed. No, sir. It's complicated. I read your file, Aizawa continued, his voice low. The official one, and the supplementary report from Nizu and All Might. Born quirkless. A villain attack. Fusion with an unknown support item. They're calling you a posthuman in the internal memos. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. During these tests, you didn't just display power. You displayed tactical analysis, creative problem-solving, and precise control. Except for that ball throw. That wasn't control. That was a statement. You could have used raw strength, but you chose efficiency. You chose intellect. He paused, his gaze becoming hard as flint. You have more raw potential than anyone in this class. Your power isn't limited by biology. It's limited only by your imagination and your energy reserves. You could become the greatest hero of your generation. Izuku felt a flicker of hope, and Aizawa's voice dropped, becoming deadly serious. You are the single biggest liability this school has ever accepted. You are a walking, talking, thinking weapon that is currently under the delusion that it is a 14-year-old boy. That weapon protocol Nizu's report mentioned? The self-preservation instinct that can override your will? That makes you a danger not just to yourself, but to everyone around you. The hope in Izuku's chest turned to ice. So here's the deal, Aizawa said, his eyes glowing with a faint red light, a hint of his power. I will push you harder than any other student. I will test your limits, I will break them, and I will force you to rebuild them stronger. I will put you in situations that force you to choose between the machine's logic and a hero's heart, over and over again, until your choice is as natural as breathing. You will prove to me, every single day, that you are more than just a tool. He leaned in, his voice a harsh whisper. The moment you fail, the moment the machine takes over and you can't take it back, I will not hesitate. I will erase your power, bind you in my capture weapon, and I will personally see to it that you are expelled. Don't disappoint me. With that, he turned and walked away, his scarf trailing behind him like a promise. Izuku stood alone on the field, the weight of Aizawa's ultimatum pressing down on him. It was terrifying. It was daunting. But it was also a challenge. Aizawa wasn't just threatening him. He was acknowledging the battle being fought inside him and daring him to win it. He looked down at his hands, one flesh, one metal. He wasn't a weapon that thought it was a boy. He was a boy who was learning to command a weapon. And he would not fail. As he turned to head back to the locker room, he found his path blocked. Bakugo stood there, his hands shoved in his pockets, his shoulders tense. His usual explosive rage was gone, replaced by a quiet, simmering intensity that was far more unnerving. Deku, he said, his voice dangerously low. We're not done. His crimson eyes weren't just angry. They were confused, and that confusion was curdling into a new, more potent form of rage. I saw your file. I know you were quirkless. So tell me. What the hell are you? Before Izuku could answer, All Might's voice boomed over the school's PA system, announcing the first foundational heroics class. I am coming through the door like a normal person. The moment was broken. Bakugo shot Izuku one last look, a look that promised a reckoning. This afternoon, Bakugo snarled. The indoor combat trial. You and me. We're going to see what that pile of junk can really do. He then stalked off, leaving Izuku with the chilling certainty that his next test would not be from a teacher. It would be from the explosive, furious, and deeply threatened rival who refused to accept the reality of what he had become.